Well, hello, and happy Sunday, wherever you are, or whatever day it is whenever you hear this. So I'm going to take a deep breath and dive into the deep end here without swimmies and just go for it. So everybody who gets easily triggered, who wants to only focus on spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity, who isn't ready for some cognitive dissonance or ego deaths, you can scroll on because we're going to get a little nitty gritty here. I did just put up a very intense video with, of course, a trigger warning by Gina Phillips about the grooming and programming in the Illuminati satanic Freemason cult of children and how that works in both hierarchy families or families adjacent to hierarchy in some ways or bloodline. And I do not feel that this programming happened to me personally, but I do feel I've dealt with a lot of clients over the decades. I'm not going to say over the years, I'm going to say over the decades of the work I do with people. And if you had told me 30 years ago that satanic ritual abuse and the harm of children was so rampant in this realm, on this earth plane, I would not have believed it. I could not have believed it. My brain could not have gone there. It is only after decades of personal testimonies and anecdotal evidence from just people off the street, people who came to see me for intuitive counseling sessions, for readings, for energy work. And then the threads are very, very obvious after a while, and the patterns are as well. So Gina's putting together some really important and, again, very disturbing intel. Now, I have a lot of friends who are like, why do you focus on that so much? I couldn't do what you do. I couldn't listen to those stories. I wouldn't be able to just sit there and hand them tissues and hug them and hold their hand when they cry about, being molested or abused or sodomized or raped, right? And believe me, this is not something I ever would have consciously signed up for, but I'm sure it's part of my soul mission. And so I would not at all say I'm desensitized to it or that it doesn't bother me. I would, however, say that I have some loving detachment towards these phenomena at this point because of the repetitive nature and the commonalities that I've heard through these stories. So there's a knee-jerk aversion to people actually wanting to or being willing to wake up all the way to what I kind of call the fuckery or a crash course in evil. Now, again, I did not seek this stuff out. Well, I did do research when I was trying to understand it, but I did not really seek most of the stuff out. It found me in the form of people telling me their trauma stories. I am not trauma informed in the sense of formally trained. This is now more just because of the nature of the intimate conversations I get into with people and the confessions they share of things that were done to them in ritual or by family members or by the neighbor down the street or the babysitter's boyfriend or on and on and on. So not all of it is satanic in nature, but a lot of it is, and it's generationally passed down. And 18 months is the age that it often starts at, sometimes younger, unfortunately. And 18 months pops up a lot in the cult, actually. I know that Jessica Simpson wrote her Tell Some, Tell Most, Not Tell All book, and she talked about her relationship with John Mayer in it quite a bit. And I believe he is a programmer and handler for the system, which I have talked about as ad nauseum in podcasts. I'll put them below. That's why I'm shadow banned. That's why I can make a little video about a tiny pepper and tomato and I can get 1,500 views in a couple of hours. But if I talk about this stuff, I am one of the few people liking it and maybe one other person out of whoever's listening. So I get it. It's very heavy topic. It's not lighthearted. I do often try to bring some, even dark humor to it because I know it's taken a long time for me, and I was extremely not okay when I first got, as some people call it, red pilled, or shown the things that are going on behind the veil and behind the curtain. And you guys, like, whatever they're saying about Epstein List and Maxwell and this and that and the other, that's like a drop in the bucket. It's the tip of the iceberg compared to what's really going on with these cults and these interlinked cults and these Freemason lodges and all over the place. So now what I will say about that is there's what's considered Farm League, which is 33rd degree and under. And that's not when the sort of sacrifices or rituals or sodomizing happens. It's more at 33rd degree and up. But someone told me they start grooming the initiates, a former Mason, from the 28th degree on up to be able to activate some Delta programming and assassin programming and stuff, and be able to basically eradicate human life. Which most of us who have that more Christ consciousness, do unto others, golden rule, service to others kind of operating system. I mean, it doesn't make us perfect. It doesn't make us holier than thou, and it doesn't make us immune to sin by any means. What it does, though, is it helps you see through a lot of the satanic and Luciferian concepts and programs, and how they use these absolutely slimy tactics like trauma bonding the child to the programmer very young through sexual acts, and instilling absolute deep insecurities in them from very young ages about their own bodies, about shame, about staying attractive, staying fit, not getting fat. That's why there's so much fat shaming on this planet. It's crazy. It's all very satanic, very Freemason. Of course, they make whole industries out of it. Take this pill, take this shot, eat this supplement, do this, do that. It's really, if an alien landed here, they'd be like, why are you guys all so obsessed with dieting? But it's all interlinked to, as Gina lays out in that video I just posted, staying attractive and fit for your handlers, because it's a life or death thing. So that really shed some light on things. But anyway, like I was starting to say, Jessica Simpson said that John Mayer had told her that he could get any woman, famous or non-famous, or basically any person, to fall for him in 18 months. And so she said that made her want to vomit in the book. And it took me a while to register that that's what was going on from about 2017-ish with other people, and 18 peak with him, and 2018 to 19. Well, now here we are, 7 years after all this targeting started in my own life. And I think one of the grace bits I had, or one of the grace points I had, was that I was in my mid-40s when this all started happening. I'm now 54. It's been almost a decade, really. It's been at least 7 to 8 years of intensity. Doesn't mean I don't think there were markers or things that were happening in my early life or my whole life, but I do not feel, just again for the record, that I was harmed in that way. And I do think there are some people who are wild cards, and they kind of stumble into things. And that's what I believe I was and am, is a wild card. Someone who just stumbled into the beehive, if you will. It reminds me of a story when I was a kid. My friend and I took an umbrella, a very Masonic symbol. Umbrella is the thing that hides the crimes. They also do hidden hand, which is like that they answer to a hidden hand. There's a higher authority than any human hand. And of course, we see that a lot. But anyway, it's a lot of dark, webby, sticky stuff that is all very interwoven, and it takes years of personal experience and research to start to even see the programming, let alone break out of it, or be able to almost deprogram yourself, which I do believe is possible. And I do believe a big part of that is writing. So Kathy O'Brien, who's a very famous whistleblower, has also talked about having been basically violated by Hillary Clinton when Kathy was 17, and she'd already been trafficked to Reagan and a whole bunch of people, which she has testified in front of Congress about this. So anyway, she has books about PTSD and how to write things out, and that purges it from your system. Well, I'm very blessed that writing and word magic are some of my gifts. Now, when I use the word magic, I don't use it in a black magic way or in a, messing with other people's will way. I don't believe in that. I use it more like my gift from Creator, from God. So luckily, because I am, I believe, a scribe of sorts and a messenger of sorts, the writing has been my go-to my whole life. And it has helped me, I think, stay mostly out of the programming, or at least be able to identify it and feel the energy behind it so that I wasn't as easily hooked. Doesn't mean I wasn't hooked. Doesn't mean I wasn't duped like all of us. It doesn't mean that I figured it all out or cracked every code. Absolutely not. Far from it. But it does mean that, you're going after an 18-month-old, you're going to have a lot easier time programming them and bonding them to you through trauma than if you're trying to use those same tactics and apply them in a cyber way to a 45-year-old who's already lived quite a bit of life. I'd already traveled the world at that point, written 3 books, had love affairs, fallen in and out of, relationships and things. Mostly I'm what they call an avoidant, but I think it's just intelligence to avoid people who want to dominate, oppress, humiliate, or abuse you in any way. Like, that's not a kind of intimate partnership or connection I would ever sign up for. So I'd rather stay single and alone and alive and happy and free than to be part of a hive-minded cult that participates in death and sodomy rituals of children. I think that's a pretty common sense stance, and I'm not trying to be arrogant when I say that I didn't want to get caught up in that. I was never even tempted, obviously, because I think children are amazing and I could never imagine hurting one. What I think happens, and what Gina, sort of breaks down, and what Jesse Czebotar breaks down, and Jesse's last name is spelled Czebotar. Again, that's Czebotar. And if you look up Jesse Czebotar, you're going to get a very quick education on Freemasons and Satanic Illuminati and their tactics and how they do this, and then how they extrapolate that to the masses and create their psyops that people are very easily brainwashed into. And a lot of that is divide and conquer. And there's a lot of eugenics that goes on, trying to wipe out humanity. Why would they do that? What's their purpose? Why would they do that? Because they hate us. They hate us because they ain't us, It's the same why we have all this Baphomet worship and denigration and humiliation of the natural-born female. There's just so much misogyny. It's not even hidden anymore. And I'm not saying that as some kind of raging, rabid feminist. It's just obvious. It's just so obvious that so women bring life. And if these creatures, because that's how I feel about them, if they are death-oriented and, like, for example, the Grateful Dead and the teddy bears and, the Walking Dead, and they just love to kind of push forth their, skull and bones kind of death culture. So if they're obsessed with death, naturally they're going to hate anyone who can, through their own body and through Creator and through light, bring life onto the planet, because that's not what they want. It's not what they want. Death and decay. They want to steal, kill, and destroy, and anything that glows with health or radiance or happiness or joy, they want to squash that. They want to kill it. They want to eradicate it, and they are very, very threatened by it. Now, people will often say, well, who's they? And I really am very clear that that's the Satanic Freemason Illuminati, and that they are the ones, the 1%ers, if you want to call them that, the initiated, if you want to call them that. I just call them evil, because that's what they are, and that's what they do. Now, a lot of them were unconscious in their evil acts and deeds and deserve some compassion, but most of them are too far gone at this point. And really, I'm not someone who is well versed in biblical things. I'm by no means a scholar on that topic, but I have done a lot of deep diving on the satanic side of things, and of course I grew up under Christian, I will say, indoctrination, and so I don't think it's about religions. It's not about the satanic religion, Christianity, Muslim, Buddhism, and those are just more control mechanisms. So I do absolutely believe in a creator, one, living, evolving God that we all came from, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the fallens, the ones who have rebelled against that creator, are the ones who suffer the most and want to inflict suffering on others. Whereas the saved, if you want to go with, again, sort of biblical lingo, are the ones who really see the evil and what it can do and what it does do, and want to rebuke that, want to bind it, and want to move away from it. Now, you have to expose it. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. And, you will go a little obsessive and paranoid when you start to understand, again, the rampant child harm system that we have all grown up very, very mostly oblivious to, unless you've been in these families or you've, participated in any of these kinds of programming situations, nobody does it voluntarily. I was going to say whether voluntarily or not, but nobody really does it voluntarily. It starts very young, and it just hijacks the psyche and fragments it and splits it. And so, they have these different designations. Delta would be your assassin programming. Beta is your sex kitten, prostitute programming. And then Omega is your suicide programming, which is encoded in people when they start to get too close to the truth and waking up to the hierarchical mechanisms that do pull the strings behind the scenes and govern us and oppress us and divide us. So what are the solutions, right? Like, what is the silver lining here in all this darkness? It's awareness and knowledge and being able to look at it without looking away. It's being able to absorb the intel without getting into total hopelessness and despair, and knowing that you will be called upon at some point as a soldier of light. And that, spiritual battle that we're in, all of us, from womb to tomb, what you're equipped with is, scripture for some, just joy and keeping a higher frequency for others. So if you want to go New Age, which the Christians would now call New Cage, and witchcraft and this and that and the other, and there's no nuance there or understanding of that Jesus was the original energy healer, and that he brought mysticism and transmutation of energy that most humans have not attained. Okay, so I don't really care how people worship if they're not hurting children. I don't really care how people label themselves or use pronouns or wardrobe or makeup if they're not hurting children. I don't really care. If you're an adult and you're having fun with another consenting adult and you guys are cool with that, then please continue and enjoy it. If, however, that crosses over into the innocence and the vulnerable and people who cannot give conscious or informed consent, now you're a problem, you're a predator, and you gotta go. So, again, as you're listening to these Epstein files, psyops and the smoke and mirrors and the look over here, not over there tactics, just remember that if you know their name, they are in the child harm game. And to them, it is a game. And it's diabolical, it's slimy, and it's disingenuous, and it's deceptive. And it will use charm, it will use flattery, and it will also use insults, and it will use shunning and silent treatment and all kinds of just extremely, like, when you look at it, if you have any emotional intelligence or any evolution in your soul, you're just going, well, that's dumb, that's really crazy, that's weird. And just other words are evil and too far gone and really split and fragmented, and someone who doesn't know how to get out of that life because they're so used to it, right? I mean, that doesn't mean we pity them, we pity their victims, right? And so that's what I want, is to hear more from the people who've been victimized rather than the perps. Like, I'm just so sick of hearing from the perps because they lie. All they do is lie to cover their ass and their cult. So I would recommend, getting yourself a cup of calming tea and listening to the Gina thing in bits and pieces, because it is very frustrating to hear and feel kind of powerless over changing something so systemic and so dark. However, knowledge is a weapon in this war. And your wisdom comes from being able to apply that knowledge in daily life. So, if you want to be on the right side of things and on the right side of history and the right side of light and the right side of love, again, God does not require us to be perfect. We are going to be flawed. We are going to mess up. We are going to get things wrong. But what Creator really wants, I believe, for us, from us, through us, is authenticity and true, even when you're confused, even when you're baffled, even when you think you've got some puzzle pieces, but others are just still very much missing. If you can be real, and there's so much fake in this world, right? Like, you can be real and you can say, you can try to fat shame me all you want. It's not going to work. You can say, you can try to tell me I'm ugly or unattractive, or that I am unsexy, or that, my vagina smells, or whatever the heck, if you just look at what they're trying to sell you 24/7, it's grooming. It's all grooming of children and adults to, be very lust oriented and very kind of broken in that second chakra and wounded, and leaking your energy and your power, right? Whereas someone who's aware of this and who's been through somewhat of the gauntlet and the gamut of it, again, for me, it was all cyber, thank God. I know for a lot of people it's very physical, and that can be its own terrifying thing. And the cyber thing is not great either. It's horrible. It's all abuse. That's what it is. And so this planet is really, split between abusers and their targets. And so we kind of don't even want to just think about Vicks and perps, because that leaves it in the criminal system. It doesn't actually understand, help people understand the spiritual components or aspects of it. And it doesn't actually cover the whole story. It's only pieces. So again, there are many Epsteins, there are many Diddies, there are many islands. And what we as regular people who would never harm a child, someone who is, identifies more with being a child of Creator rather than a spawn of Satan, like, we are not to be holier than thou and point fingers and blame and shame. I've done that for years. It gets you nowhere. And I also don't think we're supposed to just blindly forgive and have compassion and empathy. That also gets you in traps and in harm's way. We probably need a hybrid of those. But again, the compassion, empathy, and all that needs to go towards the victims. And they need to have their voice, their place, their platform, their microphones, their book deals. They now need to be the next wave of truth that washes away all of the deception and lies. Because you can't get anywhere with deception and lies. You can probably get pretty far in the sense of finances with deception and lies, but you can't get anywhere in terms of your soul. So that's a long-winded way of saying, don't be afraid to educate yourself about evil. It is important for the times we have coming ahead. And don't be afraid at all, because that is something that is repeated through the Bible hundreds of times. Do not be afraid. Be not afraid. Do not fear. Never fear. So fear is how they get you. It's how they grab you, how they hook you, and how they keep you dangling on their strings. So cut those strings. Laugh at them, even when they're gross and sick and twisted and perverted and stunted and juvenile and weird, because they will be. Laugh at them and transmute the energies. And again, put your energies towards understanding this, but not standing under it. Having a comprehension of it, but not drowning or being so immersed in it that you don't live your daily life. Okay, so I have been on a fast track with this. And I don't know why, and I may never know why, and the why in this case is not as important as the now what. So that's it, and I'm just putting the love call out to all of you who are imperfect people, but even the most imperfect person can be used by Creator for good. And you do the whole confess, repent, repair, thing as much as you can. And when you're wrong, you own it and you say sorry and try to make it better. And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, but you are doomed. You're just doomed. And I'm not the one saying that. That's, again, just a messenger moment. So if you want to be more in bloom and zoom and zippy, peppy, happy, joyful things, and rather than being mired in the muck, you got to be honest, with yourself and others. That's the key to this realm, is honesty. It is the key to every locked door, is being honest with yourself and others and finding truth. And again, it isn't just your truth or my truth. It is the truth. I think that's what we're all going to come to an understanding of, not just consensus programming where we're all hijacked and puppeted, but actual truth-oriented humans will be the ones that inherit the earth. Those are the meek ones, right? And the weak ones, the ones who give in to their temptations, their lust, their need for violence, their, blood hunger, they're pretty much screwed because they don't care. They have cremated care, they have turned off their humanity switch, and they have zero empathy left. They are running a psychopathy and demonic programming. And they don't want to change. They don't want to be good. They don't want to be real. They don't want to be honest. And they don't want to heal. They just want to harm. And when that kind of energy happens and you see someone where it's so demonic, like there's no whites to their eyes and it's all black, or there's that perma smirk and they never actually come out of, mockery or stalking or their very low level, low vibe tactics, then you just leave them in the dust. You wish them well. You wish them maybe they'll get it in the next 12 lifetimes. That's between them and Creator. What you really want to do is try to not even decultify or deprogram the masses from the mass dark spells. You just want to point them in the direction where they can do it for themselves. And again, one of my best medicines always has been and always will be writing. So that's how I express myself and how I work through these things, how I process stuff. And I just wish you to find whatever your thing is. If it's gardening, if it's petting your cat, if it's running, through some woods, find the thing that connects you back to Creator and helps you tune out the noise of the world. And big hugs and big love for these wild roller coaster crazy times we're in. And it probably will get a little more dark before the dawn, but the sun will rise. And I mean the sun, S-O-N. So I don't know about a second coming or not. I've often joked that Jesus came back, he'd come back as a woman, and everybody would say, what took her so long, But we don't have to get into all that, and we don't have to get into goddess culture or, the pronouns of the deities or the creator of this planet, because it's another more divide and conquer stuff, So stay in your heart. Keep speaking on things, even when it makes people uncomfortable. That's not your problem or your fault. That's their stuff or their ability to hang with it and go deep, or whether they want to stay shallow and on the surface. Again, if you're tapped to be a messenger, you give the messages and you let the chips fall where they do. And that's your job. And unfortunately or fortunately, something in my soul said, I'll do it. I'll be a volunteer messenger soul. And I'll be a tattletale. I'll rat people out. I'll be a snitch because I don't care. Because to me, my loyalty is not to some cult. It is not to a guy with horns. It is to the truth and to the children. And so it is. Hallelujah. Amen.